Hi, my name is Lily and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my spooky season recommendations video. So in this video I'm going to be recommending 10 books that I think are appropriate for spooky season. I'm trying to cover a variety of genres, age categories, and different requirements for spooky season, whether you want something actually scary or whether you want something more cozy. So first up we have Deadendia by Hamish, Steele, which if you've been around my channel for a while you'll know is one of my absolute favourites of all time. This is about a amusement park with a haunted house, but that haunted house is secretly a portal to the other levels of hell. And we have a talking dog and a trans lead, a sapphic co-lead kind of as you get further into the series. It is super spooky, paranormal, but it's really fun and light-hearted at the same time. It covers interesting topics but still fun and spooky, so if you're looking for something a bit more fun and spooky this season, then this is kind of the way to go. I would say if you like things like Hocus Pocus, that kind of stuff, it's more that kind of a vibe. And it is being reprinted, but I think you can still get old editions, but it has a new publisher and it is being reprinted, and book 3 should be coming at some point soon. So it's really good, and there's also a Netflix adaptation of it if you'd like to see that, which was made by the author of the book. Next up we have a little bit of a classic, and that is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Yes, I will admit the movie is better than the book, and I think even Neil Gaiman has said the movie is better than the book, but I still think the book is worth reading, especially if you're looking for a spooky, unsettling read for spooky season that is really short. So it's short, it is middle grade, kind of leans more to the older end of middle grade, but still it depends on the maturity of the reader, obviously. So this one is about Coraline, who finds a door to this alternate universe in her bedroom where she has an other mother, an other father, an other home, and the deal is that she can stay if she lets the other mother sew buttons over her eyes. It's spooky, it's creepy. I would say do not listen to the audiobook if you don't like to be scared, because the voices of the rats, which is a recurring character in the book, is really creepy. But I think it's a really great spooky season read. Younger readers tend to find it kind of spooky and fun, and older readers tend to find it scarier, so take that as you will. But yeah, really great, spooky, unsettling read, and it's Neil Gaiman, so it's gonna be fun. Basically, like most Neil Gaiman books would be appropriate for spooky season. I would also say the Graveyard book, Neverwhere is a good spooky season book. Those two as well, but this is probably his most spookiest spooky season book, even though the Graveyard book is literally set in a graveyard. But still, this is the one I'm recommending more. The next one is another favourite author of mine, and it was really hard to just choose one from her, but I have chosen my favourite, and that is Alice by Christina Henry. This is a very dark retelling of Alice in Wonderland, where Alice... Now is not the time for ice cream vans, it is October. So this is a very dark retelling of Alice in Wonderland, where Alice has attended a party and afterwards she finds herself in a mental hospital, which is very like Victorian style, very bad, and there's a fire. She and her neighbour Hatcher break out, but something darker breaks out with them. And it's about this kind of alternate universe where there's these different parts of the city, the inner and the outer city, and exploring the dark depths of the outer city. And so all of your favourite characters from Alice in Wonderland do make an appearance, but as very different characters. It is very dark. I recommend looking up trigger warnings. I don't think a lot of the darkness is explicit on paper, but there's a lot of descriptions of things that have happened in the past. It does have a sequel, which is good, but this is my favourite Christina Henry book. Very good. She has some other dark retellings. There's Lost Boy, which is a retelling of the story of Peter Pan and Captain Hook. So the sort of the prequel to the Peter Pan movies, but I think still a story that's been told, but a dark retelling of it. It is the origins of Captain Hook. And then you have The Mermaid, which is a story about P.T. Barnum finding a real mermaid and how he incorporates her into his circus and how she is exploited. And there is another retelling. Oh, there's The Girl in Red, which is a Red Riding Hood retelling, which is an Apocalypse Plague retelling. So depending on whether you're feeling like that after the last few years, that's also pretty good. So yeah, Christina Henry is a great spooky season author. Then if you're looking for more of a cozy mystery vibe this spooky season, I recommend A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. Now yes, this is very popular, but I know there's also many people out there who haven't read this. So this is about how a schoolgirl was once killed by a schoolboy in this town, but many years later, another schoolgirl does not believe that is what happened. So she decides to make it her final year project to find out who really killed this girl. And it's following her trying to uncover this story. Very good, and I feel like it was actually quite realistic to what teenagers do. One of the issues I've had when I've read Caroline McManus books is I feel like it's not very accurate to teenagers. But this one did feel very accurate to teenagers, and I really enjoyed it. Really cozy, but also really fast-paced and gripping, and I can't wait to read the other 2 books in this trilogy. So yeah, this is more of a cozy mystery vibe, but there are some thriller aspects to it. If you're looking for a proper nail-biting thriller that is like a psychological thriller, I would recommend The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. This is also available on Kindle Unlimited. This is a thriller about a nurse and doctor, wife and husband, who adopt a child that they encounter in the ER. This child has clearly had a very traumatic past, and her mother is missing, and the rest of her family don't want anything to do with her, so this couple decides to take her in because she creates this bond with the father. So they adopt her, and it's the story of basically how the mother is trying to convince the father that there's something up with this child and that she's not a normal child, and the father being completely blind to it, and what happens as her behaviour becomes progressively worse. It is something else. I have not read a thriller this intensely in a really long time. I could not stop reading it. I think I read it in the space of 24 to 36 hours. I just kept reading. It is so good. So good. It's not a particularly original idea, you know, this kind of like demented child is very common in thrillers and horror, but I think it's a very interesting take on it. The author used to be a child psychologist, so there is that kind of element brought into the book as well, which I find very interesting. So yeah, really great thriller, very different to other books that have a similar premise. Now, the next one is another very popular book, but some of you may not have read it yet, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. So this is a dark academia / horror / thriller. It's much darker than any of Leigh Bardugo's other books, but I really recommend it. So this is about Alex Stern, who is on a scholarship at Yale University, where she, as part of her scholarship, has to kind of act as part of a supervisory body over the secret societies of Yale, who all do blood magic. And one day a young girl turns up dead on the campus, and it's all kind of covered up, but she thinks that the explanation that has been given is false, and she decides to start investigating. And this follows her investigation, what happens, and also looks into where her ability to see ghosts has come from. It's very interesting, very good. I would say I didn't really predict any of the plot twists in this book. It was just one of the best books I've read in a really long time, and Leigh Bardugo is so talented. It is very dark, so again, look up trigger warnings if you need them. There are some trigger warnings, but if you skip the passage, you'll still be able to read the book, so maybe look into doing that. But just such a top tier book. So dark, so thrilling, so enthralling. I cannot wait for Hellbent, which is the sequel, to come out. I think it comes out in January, so I will be rereading this soon, and just 10 out of 10. It's such an amazing book. The next one is one that I would say has a similar vibe to Ninth House, but is more young adult and less dark. Well, I still think it's quite dark, but it's less, you know, explicit because it's a young adult book, and that is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. So this is a young adult. It's very spooky season. It's a fantasy, but it's kind of more of a supernatural fantasy. So this is about a world where there are children with magical abilities that are hidden in these time loop pockets by their keepers. And in these time loop pockets, they loop the same day over and over again, but it keeps them safe from people trying to hunt them down and kill them. The main character is led to one by his grandfather's past, I think, and he falls into this time loop and meets these children. And while he is there, there's this kind of evil body that are trying to infiltrate these time loops and kidnap the keepers and kill the children. While he's there, their keeper gets kidnapped, and he joins the children on this expedition to save her, and sort of, as the series progresses, bring down this kind of evil group of people that are trying to kill all the magical children. It is darker than it sounds, much darker than it sounds, especially when you get to the later books, it gets quite dark. And what's really cool about this one is that it incorporates these vintage pictures and they're trick photos. The author collected these trick photos and he then built the story by using the trick photos. So the first book does it the best because the book was written around the pictures, but then obviously in later books the story is established, so he has to then try and find pictures that fit the story. But in the first book it's really cool. So you get each child is explained by their own trick photo, that's where each of their magical abilities has come from, and yeah, it is just so cool. I highly recommend it. It's a really great reading experience, and I think it's a 6-book series now. It was originally a trilogy and now there's a second arc, so it's kind of like 2 trilogies that form a 6-book series and 2 spin-off books. And I've read the original trilogy and it's so good, and I'm going to be reading the next trilogy soon. So such a good spooky season read, really dark spooky vibes. Now my next recommendation is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. This one is another great spooky season recommendation because if you like lesbians and necromancy, here is a book for you. So this is kind of like if you set a medieval fantasy in space. It's very medieval feeling, but it is in space, and there are rocket ships, but there's necromancy. So this is about these houses of necromancers who each of the heir to each of the houses has been invited by sort of their overlord to compete to win immortality, but to do so they have to have a cavalier who is like their sword. And this one follows Harrow, who is the heir, and Gideon, who is the sword, but they have been like mortal enemies since they were children. I can't explain much more about this book because this book is a wild ride. It's one of those ones where you have to trust the process. You're not going to understand much of the first book, but when you read the second book it starts to make sense. But the first book is just such a fun ride. The third book is now out. I think there's going to be 4. Originally it was meant to be a trilogy, but as the author was writing the third book she realised it needed to be split into 2, so there are now going to be 4 books. So third book is out. You can see them here, the Illumicrate editions here, the Skulls ones. So you have Gideon the Ninth is the first one, Harrow the Ninth is the second one, and then Nona the Ninth is the third one. And the fourth one, I can't remember what it's called, but we do know what it's going to be called. So yeah, this is Lesbian Necromancers in Space, trust the process, wild ride kind of a book. And I think it's on Scribd, so if you want to read it for free, try it there. It's a wild ride, but I highly recommend it, especially for spooky season, because it is necromancy and it's dark and stabby. My next recommendation is a middle grade, and that is City of Ghosts by V. Schwab. So this one is definitely more of a cozy, spooky book. This is about Cassidy Blake, who is able to pull back the veil on the world and see the ghosts and spirits in this world and communicate with them. But conveniently, her parents are also TV ghost hunters. So she travels around the world with them to all of these very haunted places while her parents make these ghost hunter documentaries. She is actually talking to the ghosts that are there. And it is sort of about what this ability means and what happens when someone else finds out that she's able to do this. It is great. It is really spooky but really fun. Her best friend is a ghost, so if you're looking for something a bit more lighthearted, a bit lighter than some of the other books I recommended, but still spooky and still supernatural, then give this one a go. Now, my final recommendation is not necessarily super spooky, but I feel like this is the one for people who want to feel kind of spooky but whilst being cozy, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This is about a world where magical children are sort of taken away from their homes and sent to boarding schools, and our main character Linus is sent to go and inspect this boarding school, and it is where the most like extreme cases have been sent, and so they're inspecting it to see whether it needs to be closed down, and the children need to be sent to different homes. And it is about Linus visiting the school, meeting the children and finding out that maybe they're not as people think they are. And I would say it's good for spooky season because you have all of these kids with supernatural powers, and some of them are not all human, and it is really interesting, really cozy. But if you want to feel like a cozy spooky fantasy, I think this one fits the bill. It's really heartwarming. The audiobook is also really, really good. So yeah, if you want something a bit more cozy but something still fantasy, this is one that I'd recommend. So those are my top 10. When I say top 10, those are 10 of my spooky season recommendations. If you have any more requests, let me know in the comments and I'll see if I have any books that fit what you're looking for this spooky season, but hopefully I've covered a nice broad range there for you. Let me know if you do read any of them or if you've read them and you love them, because I love all of these books. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give me a like and subscribe to see more content from me. All of my social media links are in the description below, and if you'd like to leave me a comment to let me know you are here, leave me a little ghost emoji in the comments below. So thank you again for watching. Bye!